Hey everybody, welcome back to this special episode of the Quest for the Bestest. We've convened a Congress of the People to come and discuss a very important issue that has been residing in the back of our minds for many weeks. I'm Timo Nelson. I'm joined by Tucker Hazel, Abram Buhner, and Tanner Dykstra. And today we are serious. We're not having any fun. We're here to have a discussion. I think we'll have a little fun though. If you hadn't noticed, on the list there's a peculiarity that we think about a lot and that causes us lots of angst while we rank. And we've mentioned it a couple times and we joke about
angst.
It. The rank angst. The rankst. Okay, that's the only fun we're allowed to have. No, I'm kidding.
Sorry.
It's The Godfather Part 2. What do we do about this film? Some of us think it's in the right spot, and some of the rest of us think that it's not in the right spot. And so we've convened here today to discuss and possibly put it in a new place that's more fitting to where the film should go. And maybe with the purpose of making it a little easier to rank some other films, because we've had some questions resulting from its current position. It lies at number 10. But that's, out
of 20 currently.
Out of 20. Yeah. So it's in the dead center. But it's a result of it being ranked, getting films put above it week after week. Maybe due to some weird stuff. I mean, you have to go back into the annals of what's going on beforehand in previous episodes to really hear our reasoning about why stuff gets put above it. But it did, and maybe we were in error many weeks ago.
If you are a long-term fan of Quest for the Bestest, you will have picked up on the fact that our ranking system may have fluctuated slightly since the earliest infancies of this series. But I think we've settled into it now, and it's time to re-rank the worst offender of the follies of our past.
Mm-hmm. Here's the thing, right? I'd like to state for the record that this isn't my fault. I said from the beginning that The Godfather Part 2 was too low.
No one's pointing fingers here.
No one's pointing fingers, but I want to make sure that if someone was to point fingers, it wouldn't be pointed towards me. But speaking of Tucker, as Tucker says in his favorite phrase of all time, The Godfather Part 2 has been living in our head rent-free. So it's time for us to reconsider. And I have to say, if we're going to jump into it, I think that this film is many spots too low. For me, The Godfather is 3.5 hours of excellent plot, theme, characterization, pretty much every metric I'm compelled by. Godfather Part 2 hits that post and exceeds it. So for me, I personally going to be campaigning for a big jump here. But that's just kind of my position.
I see.
Now, just a side question.
Yes, Tucker.
For Abram, do you know just personally where this ranks in your favorite films of all time? Is it up there? Do you have like a number?
I don't have an exact number, but it's definitely probably my top 20 films of all time.
Okay.
There you go. So someone's laid their cards out on the table. Where the poker faces are coming apart, and the positions are being laid out. I agree that this film is too low. I think that's what we're here to talk about, it being too low. And I think that there were some choices that I made that I will own up to in placing specifically the Hurt Locker. The Hurt Locker was the beginning of my downfall, where the Hurt Locker got placed above The Godfather Part 2 in like episode 6 or something like that. And then everything fell apart for me in how I rank it. I often ranked movies that I thought were worse than The Godfather Part 2 above it because of its numerical position. And I think my idea of rectifying this error is to change its numerical position somewhere higher to make it fit a little better and to make my conscience a little clearer about, putting the Hurt Locker above The Godfather Part 2. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. That was a mistake.
I'll just hop in quickly here because I'm basically of the same opinion, and I'll give you a wild guess to who is not of that same opinion. But yeah, same thing with Timo. The ranking of the last several films that we've done have been impacted by the placement of Godfather Part 2. Some I put above it, some I put below it, but all of which I feel most of them are inferior to The Godfather Part 2. So it's time to rectify that, but first we have to hear from a certain party pooper in our midst.
A word from our sponsor right here, Tucker Hazel. So I've got a couple things to say about this. I am a proponent of the fact that I believe that the not unanimous, but group decisions that we made in the past. Of course, yes, our ranking system has changed quite a few times. I would love to go back and recap how we did it the first few times. It was bad, but we've settled in. I think the last 10 episodes it's been about the same, and we're going to be treating it the same in this. We're going to be doing an official re-rank where we all submit our numbers, get the average, and that's where it's going to go. But I'm campaigning personally, from my perspective, that it is totally fine where it is because we made those decisions as a group in the past, and that of course our opinions can change, but that the fact that it's so low is because of us. And so I'm campaigning for it to stay where it is at the moment, which, and your arguments may influence how I feel. I might put it up. I might, just to spite you, put it down lower. I'm not going to do that. But personally, little insider baseball on Backlog Banter here, we actually did try to record this discussion last week. Didn't turn out great. We're fresh. We're back. We're doing an amazing job here. You guys are great. Love you all. Yeah. In which I said that I base a lot of my decisions on ranking things around the fact that The Godfather 2 Part 2 is in the middle. And films that I personally enjoy more than it, I start it there and put them above it, and vice versa. So it's going to mess up my ranking when we inevitably do put it higher. But, it's about the majority, so I'm willing to concede that perfectly well. But also putting it out there, I like this movie. I think The Godfather Part 2 is a great movie. I just don't think it's better than some of the other ones. I think it's better than Part 1, but that's where I'm putting it out.
Wow, that's so. My mind's kind of blown by Tucker's admittance right there. Wow.
Yeah, I just spilled a lot of beans on all you.
Yeah, you really did.
But yeah, Tucker has a point there that we did make our bed and now we are refusing to lie in it, going against the saying there. Much like pushing a man into a lake and then saving him to get the key to the city. But
here's what I think I want. Part of what's so compelling about
let's hold him to a river in Lego City.
Thank you.
Part of what's so compelling, I think, about Quest is the fact that we are taking Best Picture winners, not nominees, but winners, and putting them against each other. And in a stroke of fate that put this show off to a good start with the Celestial Bodies, we got Godfather Part 1 and Part 2 back to back. And I think because of that, and because of recency bias and because of all kinds of things of the way we were watching these films, I think that if Godfather Part 2 had come up now, we wouldn't be having the same discussion. The fact that it happened in episode 3, I think, colors a lot of things because, like Tucker said, yes, this is a show about the majority and about comparison and everything, right? And at a certain point, that there's that conflict and compromise, and the list is what it is. However, the fact that we're all coming back to it, whether it's our fault or not, I refuse to take blame for anything ever. But assuming that regardless of why we need to reconsider it, we are reconsidering it because it's important and because all of us are being significantly affected by it. Now, here's what I will say.
Yes.
Personally, we've got one Tucker Hazel, and while I don't always respect his opinion, it's important to listen to it from time to time. And I think to swing in the other direction, I don't think it's enough for us to just say, okay, the film should be higher. I think we should talk about why it should be higher.
Yeah,
in the context of the fact that why does this matter? Why are we trying to shift it around? So I'll just kind of open that up to anybody. Why does The Godfather need to move beyond I really like it? Well, because I do. But there's more to it behind that.
I think you're exactly right. We got to talk about the substance here. And for me, the substance of The Godfather Part 2 is that out of all these Best Picture winners, it actually has a lot going for it. You talk about that recency bias, and I think that I really didn't quite see. I remember talking about in the review, I wasn't feeling parts of it. But looking back, there's so much excellency in this movie. I mean, all the flashback scenes with young Vito Corleone, and then comparing that to how aging Michael Corleone is failing, and all these elements. Just story-wise, I think the story didn't compel me so much back in the day, but I think it really does now. And I think there's a lot to say about just the gangster epic. I mean, I don't even, there's only 3 movies that fit in the genre of the gangster epic, and they're all part of the same trilogy. But there just is something to The Godfather Part 2 that I wasn't giving it credit for when we saw it and talked about it the first time.
Yeah, I'd have to agree. If I can just, it's been we're pretty far removed from it. It's been weeks and weeks, like we said, but months even.
Yeah, really.
But I just think looking at our ranking, I have it pulled up on my cellular device here. There's just so many films that The Godfather Part 2 does characterization better than. I feel like the characterization of Michael Corleone and Vito Corleone in the first film, Michael in the second, is incredible. It's unmatched in a lot of other films, especially some that we have on our list. My personal enjoyment of some of the films on our list are higher than The Godfather Part 2, but just on the basic fundamentals of filmmaking, Godfather Part 2 exceeds a lot of films that we have above it.
I've been one to question Ford Coppola's directing ability, but, that is sort of in a joke. I actually think Godfather Part 2 is very well directed. It's very intentional, and I think, Michael Corleone as or Al Pacino as Michael Corleone, they're interchangeable in my mind, the two characters. The performances are great. I mean, Robert De Niro as young Vito, he's great. He's so much fun to watch. And the film, I think about it as, relying and building these elements, and it's not gimmicky. It's not gimmicky at all. Whereas I feel like there are films on this list that do have an element of gimmick to them that are higher than Godfather Part 2.
Yeah, certainly. I just looking back and remembering the film now, the first time I watched it, I was not so high on like the juxtaposition, of young Vito Corleone as portrayed by Robert De Niro, juxtaposed with Michael Corleone and him taking over the family and him having it almost slip through his fingers a little bit. But in my rewatch and in subsequent time since, I've come to realize how great that juxtaposition is, and I think a lot of those thematic elements just aren't matched again by a lot of films that we have above it. Also, if we're ranking it on vitamin C content, should be number 1, maybe number 2.
Something I think is really impressive, and you guys have been talking about it, is just the complexity with which this film is assembled and the ways that things are set up and knocked over, not only the arcs between characters, but the way we see Michael lose his grip and the way you can contrast the way that Part 1 ends against Part 2. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of really interesting stuff here. And sometimes you think of interesting elements in a film in terms of their potential, but for me, The Godfather Part 2 executes completely on its potential. It's a film about execution opposed to that potential. It's about laying out this grand vision of this crumbling man against this one who's rising up. And the fact that, the film is incredibly long, but the fact that you don't feel that as you're watching these character arcs move and intersect in the way that the plot is weaving around, it's rare that I find myself transfixed by a film that is not, cyberpunk related or science fiction related, and that's a personal bias. But the fact that this very human story can be told in such a rich way for the duration of time it's told for and continue to be compelling from the first frame to the last, to me, says a lot about the potential of the medium and what you can accomplish in film. I really think that this is a masterclass in many, many, many respects.
Sure.
Okay, we've laid out some cases. I want to get a number down to see just how far, where it moves, and then I think we can talk about it further. So I'm waiting on a vote from one particular individual.
Yeah, sorry. I was just listening to the rest of you.
He wanted to. I completely understand you want.
How should I send it to you? Sorry.
Via the cellular device.
He had to soak in the arguments, much as we soaked in Godfather Part 2.
Like a fine Italian bread soaks in the oil and vinegar at the Italian restaurant.
Like how you soak in a bath of orange juice. Like oranges that you see in Godfather Part 2.
So I did just submit my number. I actually was convinced of some of its qualities through what you're saying. Through what Abram was saying, through the qualities that both Timo and Tanner were espousing here. I was sitting here thinking a lot about personal taste in movies, the idea of recognizing a film's objective qualities, even if it doesn't personally connect with you. And I have to say that I still do like this movie. I think it's a very good movie. Mm-hmm. I think the reason that I personally can't, in my own good conscience, put it much higher, which I sent him, I put it at number 9. So I moved it up one spot. But I just don't remember almost anything about this movie. I mean, it's just, I unfortunately have to disagree on the fact that I do feel the runtime. This was the second time I watched it, and I think that I didn't gather much more from that rewatch. Of course, I was more familiar with the characters and knew what to expect, but that just, there's so much of just the same thing over and over again. There's so many characters, and they're all pretty much filling the same roles, and people die that only got a little bit of character time, and like there's just so many aspects to this film that I can't say engage me more than the fact of me recognizing, yeah, this is well put together. The performances are good. I like the cinematography. But I need something else to hook me, and I really don't think this film has that. I think that the aspects that some of the other films I have higher, like with Gentleman's Agreement, tackling a little bit more of social commentary, or Argo having a really unique concept, or the execution of The Hurt Locker being filmed in such a unique way. Godfather Part 2 is probably my favorite crime movie in a genre that I think is very samey and very saturated. And while it is the peak of that, I don't think it does too much to separate itself from that. It set the ground level in a great way, but it doesn't have any hook above that. And so on my personal list, I have a separate list that's my personal ranking of the films that we've watched. I have Godfather Part 2 and Part 1 at 14 and 15 out of 21. Just below From Here to Eternity, which I'm proud of here. But I mean that's really all I have to say. I mean it comes down to personal taste, and I totally understand that. But I'm ranking these on my own personal taste. I'm not gonna use someone else's ranking method.
We are ranking them objectively on the qualities of film.
Exactly. This does come down to the fact that we have four minds watching this, and we're all ranking it from different perspectives. And I think it's very cool that we are able to balance it out through the voting system. But I'm not going to change mine to fit the group. So I don't know. I think I've presented my case pretty solidly.
Okay.
So I've got a number.
Oh God.
Are you ready for it? It is.
Why not?
It is 4 1/4. So 4.25, which would put it at 5th place, in between Argo and The Hurt Locker, which would satisfy my Hurt Locker grievance. But I did mention the gimmick movie, and Argo is my gimmick movie. Argo's a gimmick to me now. I feel the suspense, but the suspense is so gripping and so all-consuming that it doesn't allow for me to think about anything else in the movie, whereas The Godfather Part 2 has all these other elements that it lets me think about while I watch it, whereas Argo, I'm consumed by stress eating my popcorn while I watch it. And so for me, the 4th place seems a little more agreeable. It's where I personally put it. Tanner, if you want to say where you put it, I'm actually...
I put it at number 3, so that would be replacing Gentleman's Agreement. So the top 3 would be Godfather, Parasite, Godfather Part 2.
Yep, and then Abram, the man of the hour.
I put the film at number 1.
Wow.
I really think that The Godfather Part 2 iterates on what Godfather Part 1 did in more interesting ways.
I agree with that.
I really think that they're two parts of a larger narrative, but the ways that what the foundation Part 1 builds, the house Part 2 builds on top of it, is so interesting. And I mentioned it before, but the way you have that incredible multi-hit ending to Part 1, that feels so different when you watch the ending of Part 2.
Yep.
And seeing that movement for me is so incredible. And the fact that, the fact that Ford Coppola was able to make Part 1 and then recontextualize that, make the Majora's Mask of Godfather films with Part 2, I think is just such an achievement. So, of course, I would put it above Argo personally. I disagree with the concept of it being a gimmick, but I do think that it is a stronger film. That said, if we want to play to Tucker a little bit more and to play to the math, I'm fine leaving it at 5, even though I do believe that the strength of this film should put it at number 1. Where it lands is where it lands.
It's a bittersweet. It came in just behind, just the fingernails touch behind the finish line of Argo. So it's bittersweet, but it moved. It moved up halfway.
It moved 5 positions if we're going to go with its new position at 5th place. Which
Shima, where did you put it?
I put it at 4. I put it right above Argo. I think.
Okay.
I think Gentleman's Agreement. I kind of agree with you, Tucker, that it has. The Gentleman's Agreement is such an interesting and strange film in its relevance to me that it deserves award, accolades for it being up there with just like, what the heck, this movie from 47 like makes me think about social issues today, like that. I think that's
incredible,
worthy of praise.
Yeah, I do think I'm with you, Timo, on Argo as well. Just you have a friend in me. You have a friend in me to sort of temper expectations and liking of Argo.
So
now here's the thing, boys. Hold on.
Yes, Tucker.
I'm gonna concede it up a place because I think that while numerically doesn't necessarily, it's so close to that number 4 that I think my pushing it down a little bit isn't necessarily fair to the majority of the audience here. So we're gonna.
Wow.
I'm bumping up to number 4.
Argo,
I think is
he pulls out his pen and his paper and he signs the executive order.
It's certainly a crowd pleaser. Argo is a crowd pleaser. I'll give it that. I had a good time watching it.
It's a good movie.
Yeah.
Here's the problem. I would say the top 10 are all like really good movies.
Well, yes. Yes.
And so that's the challenge of our duties here. Mm-hmm. But a 4th place, pleasing to me. I feel the shoulders are so light and so airy.
I have a range of movement in my shoulders.
Now that I can
look at that.
And to me, everything else just kind of falls into place in the rest of the list. Yeah. Actually,
let's just stop doing the show.
There we go.
Yeah,
fine now.
Nothing else to talk about.
Cut.
Right on.
Okay, well, we are pretty much out of time on this one. I wanted this to be a little bit shorter so we could just get this, you hear our reasonings, we get our re-rank, and then and you don't have to spend a full afternoon listening to us blab on about movies. Or you could binge the whole show. That would make me pretty happy.
Just watch all the old episodes.
That'd be great.
All right. We'll have new ones.
We've got a new one coming down the pipeline, so watch out for that. Mm-hmm. We'll catch you next time. Thanks for listening to our special episode of The Quest for the Bestest. We'll be back next time.
So long.
I just splurged all over my notebook. Fuck.
Let's get down to brass tacks.
You had a very reflective look on Vizek. And you were just thinking about Glover, the fucking stupid ass N64 game.
I'm the big hamburger helper, man.
Yeah, I was gonna say that as well.